The building is going to fail in less than 3 minutes. Maya Johnson's voice cracked through the marble lobby so sharply that conversations stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. A security guard turned so fast he nearly dropped his radio. For one strange second, it felt as if the entire 32-story building had forgotten how to breathe. Maya stood near the revolving doors, her dark maintenance jacket damp from the rain outside, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to catch her breath. "Everybody needs to get out now," she shouted again. "Please, get out of the building." Several people exchanged confused looks. A man in an expensive suit laughed awkwardly and shook his head. A woman carrying a designer handbag stepped around Maya as if she were invisible. Somewhere near the elevators, someone muttered that another kid was causing trouble. Nobody moved toward the exits. Nobody listened. Maya felt panic tightening around her ribs. The sound was still there. Even through the noise of the lobby, even through the music drifting from hidden speakers, she could hear it. A deep metallic groan. Low. Uneven. Wrong. Most people would never notice it. But Maya noticed. She always noticed. The giant digital clock above the reception desk flashed 4:57 p.m. outside. Rain slid down the glass walls in long silver streaks. Inside, hundreds of guests filled the building for the grand reopening celebration of Coleman Plaza, one of the newest commercial towers in downtown Charlotte. Investors, executives, reporters, and city officials crowded the upper floors. The ballroom on the 27th floor was packed. Laughter echoed from above. Champagne glasses clinked. Nobody knew that Maya had spent the last 6 minutes running through stairwells. Nobody knew her hands were trembling because she had already heard this sound before. Not here. Not today. Years ago. Maya swallowed hard. The memory slammed into her without warning. She was 9 years old again, standing beside her uncle outside an aging manufacturing plant in South Carolina. He had stopped suddenly, listening to something she couldn't hear. Later he explained it. Buildings talked. Before they failed, steel complained. Concrete whispered. Supports warned anyone willing to listen. Most people ignored those warnings. He never did. The plant was evacuated later that afternoon after engineers discovered a critical structural problem. Maya never forgot the lesson. Listen carefully enough, and a building would tell you when something was wrong. Today, Coleman Plaza was screaming. Another groan rolled through the structure. Longer this time. Deeper. Maya's stomach dropped. She looked upward toward the ceiling. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above the crowd. The lights seemed steady. Everything looked normal. But appearances meant nothing. She knew that. "Please." Maya yelled again. "You don't understand." Heads turned. More people stared now. Some annoyed. Some amused. A few concerned. But still nobody headed for the exits. Near the center of the lobby, Richard Coleman emerged from a group of executives. Tall. Silver-haired. Perfectly tailored navy suit. The owner of the building. The man everyone came to see. His expression hardened as he looked toward the teenage girl disrupting his event. Maya met his eyes across the crowded room. The metallic groan came again, louder than before, and suddenly she realized something that made the color drain from her face. The sounds weren't getting closer. They were accelerating. Maya pushed through the crowd, her sneakers sliding slightly against the polished marble floor as she moved toward the center of the lobby. The digital clock now read 4:58 p.m. Less than 2 minutes remained, although nobody else knew there was anything to count down. The strange sound echoed again through the structure, hidden beneath conversations and laughter. To Maya, it was impossible to ignore. To everyone else, it did not exist. Richard Coleman stepped forward, drawing attention the way powerful people always seem to do. Conversations softened. Heads turned. The executives around him immediately fell silent. Maya recognized him from photographs in newspapers and business magazines. He had built a reputation from confidence, precision, and control. Everything about him reflected certainty. The expensive watch on his wrist. The perfectly pressed suit. The calm expression that suggested nothing unexpected could ever happen inside a building carrying his name. Unfortunately, certainty was exactly what frightened Maya most right now. "Young lady," Richard said, his voice measured but firm. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" Maya swallowed. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Sir, you need to evacuate everybody immediately." A few people nearby exchanged amused smiles. One investor chuckled under his breath. Richard folded his arms. And why would I do that? Maya glanced upward toward the ceiling. The building answered her with another deep metallic groan. She closed her eyes for half a second. There it was again. Longer. More strained. Because something is wrong with the structure, she said. I can hear it. The silence that followed lasted only a moment before scattered laughter broke out around them. Maya felt heat rush into her cheeks. She had expected disbelief. She had not expected people to find the situation entertaining. You can hear the structure? One man repeated with a grin. That is your expert opinion? More laughter followed. Richard remained serious, but his expression revealed skepticism. Who are you? He asked. My name is Maya Johnson. Do you work here? My father does. He is on the maintenance team. Several faces immediately lost interest. Maya recognized the shift. The moment people learned where she came from, they decided how much her words were worth. It happened all the time. Richard nodded slowly. And what qualifications do you have to make claims about a $40 million building? Maya hesitated. She was only 17. She had no engineering degree, no official title, no credentials that would impress the people standing around her. All she had was what she knew. I know what I heard, she said quietly. And I know it is getting worse. Richard glanced toward his executives. One of them stepped forward carrying a tablet. Sir, all monitoring systems are normal, the executive reported. No alerts. No warnings. Richard looked back at Maya. You see? Maya felt her stomach tighten. The problem was that machines did not always catch everything immediately. Her father had taught her that. Sometimes experience noticed danger first. Sometimes intuition arrived before data. The digital clock changed to 4:59 p.m. 1 minute. Maya looked toward the elevators. People continued arriving from upper floors. More guests entered the lobby. The crowd was actually growing larger. Rain tapped softly against the giant glass windows surrounding the building. The gray afternoon sky seemed darker now. Maya suddenly remembered something her father had said only 3 days earlier while inspecting a mechanical floor. If a structure starts talking, pay attention before it starts screaming. The memory hit her like ice water. Because the building was no longer talking. It was screaming. The giant clock above the reception desk changed from 4:59 to 5 p.m. Maya felt her pulse quicken. Every instinct told her the next moments mattered. Around her, however, life continued as if nothing were wrong. Executives checked their phones. Guests laughed beside the coffee station. Reporters adjusted cameras near the entrance to the ballroom elevators. The normalcy felt surreal. Maya stared upward toward the steel and concrete hidden behind the building's polished surfaces. Another vibration moved beneath her feet. It was subtle, almost impossible to detect. A faint tremor that lasted less than a second. Most people would have dismissed it as imagination. Maya did not. Her eyes widened. Richard Coleman noticed her expression. Enough, he said firmly. You have disrupted this event long enough. 2 security guards stepped closer. Neither looked threatening. Both simply looked tired, as if they were dealing with another unnecessary interruption. Sir, Maya said desperately, please listen to me. Something changed. Richard sighed. Young lady, every system in this building has been inspected repeatedly. Structural engineers approved every floor. Safety inspectors approved every floor. We have hundreds of people here today. Maya looked directly at him. That does not mean they cannot be wrong. The words landed harder than she intended. Several executives immediately frowned. One woman shook her head in disbelief. Richard's expression cooled. Maya realized she had just challenged not only his authority but the reputation of everyone involved in the project. The security guards moved another step closer. Let us go outside and talk, one of them suggested politely. Maya barely heard him. Her attention had shifted toward a row of floor-to-ceiling windows facing the street. Raindrops streaked downward across the glass. Then she noticed something strange. A decorative metal fixture suspended near the ceiling was moving. Not much, barely an inch, but it was swaying. Slowly, rhythmically. There was no wind inside the lobby. Maya's stomach dropped. She pointed upward. Look. Nobody did. The security guard gently reached for her arm. Come on. Maya stepped away. Look at the fixture, she shouted. A few people finally glanced up. The movement was so slight that several immediately dismissed it. It is fine, someone said. Probably ventilation. Maya knew better. Structures transmitted energy. Vibrations traveled. Small signs became larger signs. Her father had spent years teaching her that. Not because he expected her to become an engineer, because he believed paying attention could save lives. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Earlier that afternoon, before the celebration began, Maya had accompanied her father to a lower maintenance level. She remembered hearing a faint metallic pop. Her father had stopped walking. For a moment, he looked concerned. Then his radio crackled with another assignment, and they moved on. At the time, neither of them realized how important that sound would become. Maya wished desperately that he were here now. He would know what to do. He would know how to make people listen. Another tremor passed through the floor. This time a few nearby guests felt it too. Several stopped talking. A reporter looked around uncertainly. One of the security guards frowned. The movement lasted only a moment before disappearing again. The lobby fell silent. For the first time, doubt appeared on a few faces. Richard noticed it immediately. "Everyone remain calm," he announced. "There is no emergency." His voice echoed through the open space. Calm returned. Almost. But not completely. Maya looked at the clock again. Then she looked back at the swaying fixture near the ceiling. The movement had become slightly stronger. Not enough to cause panic. Not enough for proof. But enough for her to realize something terrifying. Whatever was happening inside the building was no longer accelerating gradually. It was accelerating exponentially. The uneasy silence lasted only a few seconds before people began talking again. Human nature always searched for normal explanations. A strange vibration became a passing concern. A swaying fixture became a harmless coincidence. Within moments, many guests had already convinced themselves that nothing serious was happening. Maya could hardly believe it. The warning signs were multiplying right in front of them, yet the crowd seemed determined to explain them away. Richard Coleman checked his watch and turned toward his executives. "Resume the program," he said. "We are already behind schedule." The words hit Maya like a door closing. If the event continued, hundreds of people would remain inside the building. She looked around the lobby. Families, employees, reporters, maintenance workers, catering staff, people who had no idea they were depending on someone else to make the right decision. Her chest tightened. She could not walk away. One of the security guards stepped beside her. "Miss Johnson, I need you to come with me." Maya barely heard him. Her eyes had fixed on a digital directory mounted near the elevators. The screen flickered for half a second. Then it stabilized again. A tiny malfunction. Almost invisible. But Maya noticed. She was starting to notice everything. The lights seemed slightly less steady. The floor vibrations seemed slightly more frequent. The metallic groans seemed closer together. Every instinct screamed that time was running out. "Please," she said, looking directly at Richard. "You have to clear the building." Richard stopped and slowly turned back toward her. The patience in his face was disappearing. "That is enough. You are making a mistake." A murmur spread through the crowd. Maya knew she had crossed another line. A 17-year-old maintenance worker's daughter was publicly challenging one of the most influential businessmen in the city. Richard's jaw tightened. "You are creating panic based on a feeling." "It is not a feeling." "Then what is it?" Maya opened her mouth, but hesitated. How could she explain something she sensed more than measured? She had no reports, no charts, no engineering data, only years of listening beside her father. Years of learning that buildings spoke through vibration, pressure, and sound. The crowd waited. Richard waited. Maya finally answered. "Experience." Several people laughed again. The reaction stung more than she expected. Not because they doubted her, because they never considered that someone like her might know something they did not. Richard gestured toward the exits. "Take her outside." The security guards approached. Maya stepped backward. Then another sound rolled through the structure. This one was different. Not louder, sharper. A brief metallic crack hidden somewhere deep inside the building. The laughter stopped instantly. Several heads turned. One executive frowned. Another looked upward. The sound vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Richard's expression changed for the first time. Not fear. Not yet. Uncertainty. Maya saw it immediately. He heard it too. Everyone had. The lobby became quiet. Rain tapped softly against the giant windows. Far above them, the ballroom music continued. The contrast felt eerie. Then a voice suddenly crackled across a maintenance radio clipped to a nearby employee's belt. The transmission was broken by static, but a few words came through clearly. "Mechanical level. Structural concern. Repeat. Structural concern." Maya's heart stopped. Across the lobby, Richard Coleman's face lost its certainty. For the first time since this began, He was no longer looking at Maya as though she were a frightened girl. He was looking at her as though she might be right. For a moment, nobody moved. The broken radio transmission seemed to hang in the air long after the static disappeared. Structural concern. The words echoed through Maya's mind. Around the lobby, people looked at one another, searching for reassurance. Some expected Richard Coleman to immediately dismiss the warning. Others waited for an explanation. Richard remained silent. That silence alone changed everything. Confidence had always filled the room whenever he spoke. Now uncertainty had taken its place. Maya watched his eyes shift toward one of his executives. The man quickly pulled out his phone and stepped away to make a call. Another executive opened a tablet and began scanning reports. The atmosphere changed. Not dramatically. Not yet. But the easy laughter was gone. The security guards who had been escorting Maya outside no longer seemed interested in removing her. They were listening, waiting, watching. Then another vibration moved through the floor. This time more people felt it. Several guests looked down immediately. A woman near the elevators grabbed the arm of her husband. A reporter lowered her camera. Nobody laughed. Nobody smiled. Richard turned toward one of the building managers. "I want answers right now." The manager nodded and hurried toward a side corridor. Maya could see concern spreading across faces throughout the lobby. It moved like a ripple through water. Small at first, then larger. Yet despite everything, nobody had ordered an evacuation. Hundreds of people still occupied the upper floors. Hundreds more remained inside conference rooms, restaurants, offices, and event spaces throughout the tower. Maya could not understand the hesitation. Every second mattered. "Sir," she said quietly. Richard looked at her. "If there is even a chance something is wrong, people need to leave." His jaw tightened. Maya could see the battle happening behind his eyes. Ordering an evacuation would mean embarrassment, disruption, headlines, financial consequences. Not ordering one carried a different risk. The rain outside intensified, streaking across the glass walls in silver sheets. Somewhere high above, thunder rolled across the city skyline. Then the executive who had made the phone call returned. His face had lost all color. Richard noticed immediately. "What is it?" The executive hesitated. Engineers on the mechanical level found unusual stress readings. Silence swallowed the lobby. Maya closed her eyes. There it was. Confirmation. Not complete proof. Not yet. But enough. Richard stared at the man. "How serious?" "They are still checking." Maya felt frustration surge through her chest. Still checking. Still analyzing. Still waiting. The building was not waiting. Another metallic sound echoed faintly through the structure. This time several people heard it clearly. Heads turned upward across the lobby. The decorative fixture near the ceiling swayed noticeably now. No one could dismiss it anymore. A child pointed at it. His mother pulled him closer. Fear was beginning to replace doubt. Richard looked around the lobby and saw it happening. He saw nervous faces. He saw employees whispering. He saw uncertainty spreading faster than any official announcement. Then his eyes settled on Maya again. The 17-year-old daughter of a maintenance worker. The girl nobody had taken seriously. The girl who had been warning them from the beginning. Maya met his gaze without speaking. She did not need to. The building answered for her. A long metallic groan rolled through the tower, louder than any before. This time, every person in the lobby heard it. The sound seemed to linger long after it ended. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The enormous lobby that had been filled with conversation only minutes earlier now felt strangely hollow. Rain tapped against the glass walls. The chandeliers reflected soft light across polished marble floors. Yet beneath the beauty, something invisible had changed. Fear had entered the room. Richard Coleman slowly looked around him. For the first time all afternoon, he was no longer the most confident person in the building. Maya could see it in his eyes. The certainty that had protected every decision he made was beginning to crack. A maintenance supervisor suddenly rushed from a side hallway carrying a tablet. His breathing was uneven. Water dripped from his jacket. He approached Richard quickly and lowered his voice, but not enough. Maya heard every word. "We have abnormal movement readings from multiple structural sensors." The supervisor swallowed hard. "The numbers keep changing." Several executives standing nearby immediately went pale. Richard stared at the screen. "How bad?" The supervisor hesitated. "I do not know yet." Maya closed her eyes briefly. Those 4 words were the most frightening words she could imagine. Not because they confirmed danger, Because they confirmed uncertainty. Buildings were supposed to be predictable. Engineers relied on numbers. Structures followed rules. When people responsible for those systems admitted they did not know what was happening, it meant events were moving faster than answers. Another vibration rolled beneath the floor. This one lasted longer. A few glasses rattled softly on a nearby reception table. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. Guests noticed immediately. Nervous whispers spread across the lobby. Several people began moving closer to the exits without being told. Others checked their phones. A mother gathered her children beside her. Near the elevators, a hotel employee quietly instructed coworkers to stop allowing guests onto upper floors. The atmosphere continued, changing one person at a time. Maya stood perfectly still. Her heartbeat seemed loud in her ears. She remembered standing beside her father late at night inside empty buildings while he taught her how to listen. Most people looked at structures. Her father listened to them. Steel expanded. Concrete settled. Mechanical systems vibrated. Every sound told a story. The lesson sounded strange when she was younger. Today it felt painfully real. Richard suddenly turned toward the crowd. Maya held her breath. For a moment she thought he was finally going to order everyone outside. Instead he paused. The hesitation lasted only seconds, but Maya felt every one of them. The responsibility was enormous. Hundreds of lives. Millions of dollars. Years of work. Public reputation. Everything rested on one decision. The rain outside grew heavier. Gray clouds darkened the evening sky. Somewhere above them, thunder rolled across Charlotte. Then a new sound emerged from deep inside the tower. Not a groan. Not a vibration. A low rhythmic creaking that seemed to travel through walls, floors, and columns simultaneously. The crowd heard it. Every person in the lobby heard it. Conversations stopped completely. Maya looked up toward the ceiling. The decorative fixture that had been swaying earlier now moved noticeably from side to side. No one laughed anymore. No one questioned her anymore. The building itself was speaking now, and this time everyone was finally listening. Richard Coleman finally made his decision. He stepped forward, grabbed a nearby microphone, and his voice echoed through the enormous lobby. Attention everyone. We are initiating a full evacuation of the building. Please proceed calmly to the nearest exit. For half a second nobody reacted. The announcement seemed too unexpected to process. Then movement began everywhere at once. Guests turned toward doors. Employees guided visitors away from elevators. Security teams rushed into action. Phones appeared in dozens of hands as people called co-workers, family members, and event staff still inside the tower. Maya released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. It was happening. Finally, the building's warning had been heard. But as the crowd started moving, another problem emerged. Thousands of square feet of offices, conference rooms, restaurants, and event spaces still remained occupied. Evacuation would take time. More time than Maya was certain they had. Richard immediately began issuing orders. His voice remained calm, but the strain was visible now. Clear every floor. Use stairwells. No elevators. Confirm each level. Staff members hurried away carrying radios. The lobby transformed from a celebration into an organized emergency response. Maya watched people stream toward the exits beneath the steady sound of rain outside. Then a maintenance worker burst through a side door. Maya recognized him instantly. It was her father, Marcus Johnson. His uniform was stained from mechanical dust and rainwater. The moment he entered the lobby, his eyes found Maya. Relief crossed his face. Then concern replaced it. "Maya," he said as he reached her. "Are you okay?" She nodded quickly. "Dad, the readings are real." Marcus glanced toward Richard Coleman and then back at his daughter. "I know." His voice was lower now. The engineering team found unusual load shifts between several support sections. They are trying to understand why. Maya felt a chill run through her. Marcus rarely sounded uncertain. Richard approached them. For the first time since they met, his attention focused entirely on Maya. Not on her age. Not on her background. Not on her position. On her judgment. "You noticed before anyone else," he said quietly. Maya did not know how to answer. She simply nodded. Richard looked toward the moving crowd. Hundreds of people were already outside. Hundreds more continued descending stairwells. Emergency vehicles had begun arriving across the street. Their flashing lights reflected against the wet pavement and glass walls. The city was responding. Yet something still felt wrong. Maya listened carefully. The building had changed again. The groaning sounds were no longer growing louder. They were growing more frequent. Shorter gaps. Faster rhythm. Like a clock accelerating toward midnight. Her eyes lifted toward the upper floors, disappearing into gray clouds. Then she noticed something that made her heart stop. High above the lobby, several decorative light fixtures were swaying in perfect unison. Not randomly. Not gently. Deliberately. As if the entire structure had entered a new phase. Marcus followed her gaze. Richard followed it too. Neither man spoke. They did not need to. The expressions on their faces said everything. The evacuation had started just in time. Because whatever was happening inside Coleman Plaza was no longer approaching. It had arrived. Rain poured across the streets outside as the evacuation continued. Streams of people emerged from the tower and gathered behind safety barriers set up by emergency crews. The flashing lights of fire trucks reflected across wet pavement, painting the evening in red and blue. Maya stood beside her father near the entrance, watching employees guide the last groups toward the exits. Every few seconds, someone emerged from a stairwell. Every few seconds, another section of the building was reported clear. Richard Coleman remained near the command post, speaking constantly into radios and phones. The confidence that once defined him had been replaced by urgency and focus. Yet Maya noticed something else. He was listening now, truly listening. Not only to engineers, not only to executives, to everyone, especially her. How many people are still inside? Maya asked quietly. Marcus checked a tablet being shared among maintenance supervisors. A few teams are finishing final sweeps, he replied. They are checking conference rooms, storage areas, and upper offices. Maya nodded, but her attention remained fixed on the tower. The sounds coming from within had changed again. The rhythmic creaking continued, accompanied by occasional metallic pops that echoed faintly through the structure. The building no longer sounded confused. It sounded exhausted. Nearby, several reporters began broadcasting live updates. Cameras pointed toward the tower. Questions flew between journalists and emergency officials. Nobody had expected a grand reopening celebration to become the biggest story in Charlotte that night. Richard walked toward Maya and Marcus. Rain dotted his suit jacket. He looked older than he had an hour earlier. The engineers confirmed abnormal stress throughout multiple sections of the building, he said. They still do not understand the cause. Maya glanced upward. Does it matter anymore? Richard followed her gaze. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he slowly shook his head. No, right now it does not. The admission carried surprising humility. A man who had spent years trusting plans, reports, and projections was admitting that a 17-year-old girl had recognized the danger before anyone else. Across the street, a final group of employees exited through the main doors. Applause erupted from the gathered crowd. Relief spread through the evacuation teams. Radios crackled with updates. Floor after floor reported clear. The tension that had gripped everyone began to ease. Maya felt some of it too. Not because the danger had disappeared, but because people were finally safe. That mattered most. Richard looked at her. You stayed. Maya seemed confused by the comment. Of course I stayed. Most people would have walked away after being ignored. She thought about that for a moment. Rain dripped from the edge of the temporary shelter above them. I was not trying to prove I was right, she said softly. I was trying to help. Richard lowered his eyes. The words hit harder than any accusation could have. For a moment neither spoke. Then a fire captain approached with a small smile. The last teams are out, he announced. Relief washed through the crowd outside. People hugged family members. Employees thanked first responders. Even Marcus allowed himself a tired smile. Maya looked back at the tower one more time. The upper floors disappeared into low clouds and rain. The building seemed strangely quiet now, almost peaceful. Yet deep inside, she knew the real lesson had never been about steel or concrete. It was about listening. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the only person paying attention. 6 months later, the rain was gone. Warm spring sunlight reflected across the heart of downtown Charlotte, illuminating a construction site where workers moved with steady purpose beneath a clear blue sky. The damaged tower had long since been dismantled after investigators discovered a rare combination of design flaws and hidden material failures that no one had expected. Reports had been written. Experts had testified. News stories had come and gone. Yet one detail remained impossible for the city to forget. A 17-year-old girl had recognized the danger before anyone else. Maya Johnson stood quietly near a temporary fence, her hands resting in the pockets of a light jacket. She had grown accustomed to people recognizing her now. Reporters had requested interviews. Universities had reached out. Engineering firms had offered scholarships and mentorship opportunities. The attention still felt strange. She had never wanted recognition. She had only wanted people to listen. Beside her stood Marcus Johnson, pride visible in his eyes every time he looked at his daughter. Across the site, Richard Coleman approached carrying a small folder. The last 6 months had changed him as well. His company had funded new safety initiatives across the city. He had become an advocate for listening to frontline workers, maintenance teams, inspectors, and employees whose voices were often overlooked. Experience, he had learned, did not always come from titles. Sometimes wisdom arrived wearing a maintenance badge. Richard stopped in front of Maya and handed her the folder. "I wanted you to see it first," he said. Maya opened it carefully. Inside was a rendering of the new building that would eventually rise on the site. Modern, strong, transparent. But her attention immediately settled on something else. Near the entrance was a small plaque design. She read the words silently. Dedicated to the principle that every voice matters, and to Maya Johnson, whose courage and attention saved countless lives. Maya looked up. "This is not necessary." Richard smiled gently. "Yes, it is." For a moment, neither spoke. Construction equipment hummed softly in the distance. A warm breeze moved through the streets. Life continued the way it always did. Yet something felt different. Better. Richard glanced toward the city skyline. "I spent years believing leadership meant having the answers," he said quietly. "You taught me that sometimes leadership means listening." Maya lowered her eyes, slightly embarrassed by the praise. "A lot of people helped." "Maybe," Richard replied. "But only one person heard the building before anyone else did." The afternoon sun reflected from nearby windows, casting golden light across the site. Workers continued their tasks. Traffic moved through intersections. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang the hour. Maya closed the folder and looked toward the future tower that would soon stand there. She did not see a monument to herself. She saw a reminder that kindness mattered, attention mattered, courage mattered. Most of all, she saw proof that a person did not need power to make a difference. Sometimes all it took was the willingness to speak when everyone else remained silent. The breeze moved gently across the construction site as Maya turned and walked beside her father toward the sidewalk. Behind them, the city carried on. Ahead of them, sunlight stretched across the street. And for the first time since that stormy evening, everything felt quiet.